For topic 2, we're going to discuss using a number line, which in the previous video we talked about rounding, so this may feel completely disconnected, but I promise you, knowing how to use a number line 1 is going to be beneficial because we're going to use number lines, later in math. But more importantly, if you can envision numbers on a number line, it can help you with this idea of rounding. Okay, so let's go ahead and look at a number line. So first of all, a definition. A number line is a type of graph where numbers are equally spaced on a horizontal line. To plot a point, darken the location of that number on the number line. Okay, so for example 3, we're going to do a little practice with, hold tight. There we go. We're going to do a little practice with evens and odds. Generally, people understand what even and odd numbers are, but if not, let's just discuss this briefly. So first of all, it says plot each number on the number line, and part A says all evens from 0 to 10. Well, generally, when we describe even versus odd, we describe it based on divisibility by 2. Well, we don't really know what division is. I know that we do, but we haven't really practiced that yet. So how can we understand evens and odds without using the idea of divisibility by 2? Well, a number is even if it ends in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8. So if a number ends in 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8, it's even. That means 10, because it ends in 0, is even. Okay? Now for part B, it says to plot all odd numbers from 0 to 10. Well, if a number's even, it's not odd. So kind of by default, anything on the number line that was not plotted in part A should be plotted in part B. So that tells me that if numbers end in 1, 3, 5, 7, or 9, they would be odd. So just make sure you have a general understanding of even and odd and how we've now applied this to a number line. Okay, so let's look at example 4. Example 4 is kind of the opposite. We have numbers already plotted. We need to list out what those numbers are. So for example 4, it says list the numbers in order that are plotted on each number line. Well, part A is easy because every number on the number line is labeled. Every tick mark is labeled. Okay, so we can see very clearly that 2, 5, and 9 have been plotted. So we would say the answer here is 2, and then 5, and then 9. Those are the numbers in order. Notice that in order on the number line is in order, period. So the order you see them on the number line is the order they would occur if you were counting. Now, part B is a little bit different because notice on part B, you've got all these tick marks, but they're not labeled with exact numbers. And that frequently happens. Sometimes we have so many numbers on a number line that we can't physically label each individual number. So we'll use increments. So in this case, we're incrementing by 5s. So we go from 0 to 5, and then to 10, and then 15, and then 20, and then 25. But those interior little tick marks between those labels aren't there. So we can either go through and label them, or we can just count. So if you want to go through and label them, that's not terribly difficult with a number line from 0 to 25, but what if it was 0 to 250 or 0 to 500? You couldn't go and label each individual number. It would probably not fit, and 2, it would just take too much time. But just know that if we were going to go through and label, we have 0 labeled, the next one would be 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5 is labeled, then we'd have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 is labeled, and then 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 is obviously labeled. So 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 is labeled. 21, 22, 23, and then 24. Now, it was very realistic to label the full number line because we were only going 0 to 25, but just know that in many cases it's not reasonable to do that, okay? Now, let's figure out which numbers are plotted. We can see from our labels now that we have the numbers 3, then 7, 14, 20, and 23. So if you don't end up labeling, you would just want to count until you get to a tick mark and kind of understand what that number or that tick mark or that 0 or that darkened circle or that star or whatever, that point that we've plotted, make sure you understand what number that represents. So again, in this case, it was 3, 7, 14, 20, and 23. And again, I just want to be really, really clear. We were able to label here. It wasn't unrealistic. That's not always the case. Now, let's go back to the first video's content and kind of show how understanding how number lines work can help you with rounding. Okay, so let's look at this example too. We had the distance from the moon to the earth. It was 238,855 miles. Okay, so looking at part A, we wanted to round this to the nearest 1,000. So imagine a number line. And we have here 238,000. And then imagine over here we had 239. thousand. Okay. Well, in the middle would be 238,500. Between 238,000 and 238,500 would be 238,250. And then between 238,500, 239,000 would be 238,000, let's say 750. So we haven't listed every number. It would be impossible to list that many individual numbers, but we've gotten some really important points here. Now we need to figure out where is 238,855. Well, 238,855 is more than 238,750, but less than 239,000. So it would fall somewhere in here. Okay. Now, is this closer to 239 or 238? We can see from this number line that the distance from Earth to the moon, 238,855, is much, much closer to 239,000 than it is to 238,000. So again, this idea of a number line may feel kind of like coming from left field, but it really does apply here nicely. Okay. So now let's talk about 100,000. Okay. We could do 100,000. So imagine that we have a number line. Let's go back to black. So we want to know, is the distance from Earth to the moon closer to 200,000 or 300,000? Well, in between 200 and 300,000 would be 250,000. In between 200 and 250,000 would be 225,000. And then in between 250 and 300,000 would be 275,000. Okay, so where does the actual distance from the Earth to the moon fall? Well, 238 is somewhere between 225 and 250. So we're somewhere in here. So since we're less than 250,000, that tells me I'm closer to 200,000 than I am to 300,000. So again, this idea of number lines, it's like we're talking about rounding, then all of a sudden we throw in number lines. Why on earth? Well, one, we're going to use number lines in this course, but two, it can really help you with this visualization of what we're doing when we're rounding. Okay, so there you have it. That's using a number line and knowing how to plot on a number line and pulling information from a number line.